I am VASYL Lomachenko. You're watching Dante's Boxing Nation.
Dante's Boxing Nation, what's going on, guys? First things first, I want to say congratulations to VASYL Lomachenko. He got an outstanding knockout tonight. You know, despite the fact that Roman Martinez, he wasn't the best junior lightweight in the world. I mean, we already know he's been knocked out and he's lost multiple times already. But what made this victory so impressive is how he did it and where he did it. He did it in a higher weight class. So Lomachenko moved up in weight and fought a bigger opponent, and he knocked him out in an impressive fashion. And how he did it was really impressive. You know, the thing with Lomachenko, man, he has so many skills in the ring. I mean, the way he controls geography in the ring. His foot movement is unbelievable. You know what's really interesting when I think about VASYL Lomachenko's footwork? His footwork is so impressive that VASYL doesn't even have to rely that much on head movement because his foot movement, his angles are impeccable. I mean, he can set you up so many different ways with so many different combinations just with his great footwork. But don't get me wrong. If he had great footwork combined with great head movement and waist movement, that would make him completely unbeatable. Well, I shouldn't say completely, that's a strong word. Let's just say it would make it that much more difficult to beat him, and he would be much more of a complete fighter if he had the head movement to complement his foot movement. Now, the lack of head movement did cause Lomachenko to get caught with a couple of straight right hands by Roman Martinez, excuse me, but it was only a couple. So there's no doubt about it. Right now, VASYL Lomachenko, he is a hell of a talent at the 130-pound division. I still believe fighters at the elite level at the junior lightweight division will definitely test Lomachenko. Lomachenko is an unbelievable boxer, but I still need to see how he deals with pressure. But once again, when it comes to his boxing ability, his foot movement, his ring generalship, very, very impressive. Matter of fact, VASYL Lomachenko was so impressive that normally when AKA the Gaddy list, Jim Lampley, usually when he's calling a fight, usually when there's a fighter in the ring displaying beautiful ring generalship, beautiful boxing ability, you know, the sweet science, hit and not get hit, usually Jim Lampley and now Max Kellerman, when they see fighters that display that level of talent, usually they interpret it as a fighter that's being reluctant, a fighter that is afraid, a fighter that is passive, a fighter that doesn't have heart, a fighter who doesn't have that gaddy type of killer instinct. This is usually how they interpret it. Oh, but I forgot. Lomachenko, he has his Hope Insurance, which covers criticism of being too good of a boxer and showing too great of a defense and foot movement. That's how good that damn Hope Insurance is. But you know, unfortunately, the fighters on the coincidental list, they never get approved for that Hope Insurance. But I'm telling you, man, Jim Lampley and Max Kellerman, they are starting to get more and more radical and bold when it comes to their double standards. I mean, they're getting to the point to where they don't really even try to cover it up anymore. It's like they putting it out in broad daylight now, right in front of your face. Like they said, you know, we tired of trying to hide and cover this shit up. We just gonna put it out there. Let me show you how hypocritical Jim Lampley is. The whole purpose of his Gaddy list was to try to convince people that those fighters that show great foot movement, defense, never get hit, those are not the fighters that we want to see. We want to see fighters that get hit on purpose, fighters that get bloody noses and they get hit 5 times, come back and hit the other guy 7 times. And then they go back and forth, and then someone gets knocked out. Someone goes home pissing black blood and shit like that. This was the whole purpose of Jim Lampley trying to push that gaddyless agenda. And the reason why he was doing this, so he could try to stereotype every fighter that was on the coincidental list. But what ignorant ass Jim Lampley didn't realize is that there were fighters of all different colors, races, and nationalities that also fight looking at the sweet science aspect. Hit and not be hit. So now, once you get a fighter that comes in a different package, that has the complexion for the protection, but he doesn't have the style that you've been endorsing and promoting, now you're stuck in a conundrum, because now you have to try to praise this guy without looking like a damn hypocrite. And it's fucking impossible. See, the difference from commentators that speak the whole truth versus the Jim Lampleys and the Max Kellermans, who have a strong race-based agenda when they call fights. When it comes to me, do you guys see how I praise Lomachenko in this video for what he did in the ring? It doesn't matter what he does outside of the ring. It doesn't matter what his race, nationality, or color is. Only thing that matters is what this man did in the ring. And my commentary in this video speaks for itself. It is very unfortunate that when it comes to people like Jim Lampley, the only time they praise great boxing is if that fighter has the complexion for the protection. You know, once again, all this stuff I break down to you guys. Not only am I already proving it in this video by giving you guys side-by-side comparisons, but I can also play you guys side-by-side clips of how Max Kellerman and Jim Lampley, how they call a fight when the fighter on the coincidental list is the great boxer, as opposed to how they call the fight when that fighter is on the quote-unquote gaddy list and is Hope Insurance approved. Okay? I mean, you could go back and watch videos on YouTube. Just watch any video on YouTube. Listen to what Hbo'S Jim Lampley is saying when the fighter's on a coincidental list and he's slipping punches and he's using angles and foot movement. Listen to what he says about that guy, and then switch back to Lomachenko and listen to what he's saying about Lomachenko. Once again, with me, I'm going to give you that credit regardless of what your race, color, or nationality is. If you go in that ring and you are dominant and you are showing great head movement, you're stepping up in weight, you're going to get the credit that you deserve. That is not the case with HBO. And I want to make it very clear, because it's not HBO, it's Hbo'S Jim Lampley and Max Kellerman. It's a difference. Because I've noticed over the years, commentators like Roy Jones on HBO, they have basically, or people like Roy Jones, he has basically been the voice of reason. There's been so many times where Roy Jones, he had to correct either Jim Lampley or Max Kellerman with very logical points from a boxing perspective, or not a boxing perspective, I should say from a boxer's perspective, which is Roy Jones. For example, Max Kellerman, he does little slick shit, like he's always trying to basically compare fighters like VASYL Lomachenko, who's a boxer, to other fighters that are boxers that are on the coincidental list. Like he does quite often, he likes to often compare a fighter like VASYL Lomachenko to like a Roy Jones Jr. or even an Andre Ward. And what he's always trying to suggest is basically, see what he said in this Lomachenko fight was actually interesting, because he said, you see, look at VASYL Lomachenko. Right now he's the aggressor, because like in the first two rounds, Lomachenko, he was the one coming forward. So Max Kellerman, he basically said something like, you see, with Lomachenko, even though he's a boxer, he comes forward. That's the difference from him and other boxers, is what he was basically trying to say. And Roy Jones, he corrected him, and he made a lot of sense. He said, well, if you really think about it, it makes sense that Lomachenko will come forward because Roman Gonzalez is the taller fighter with the longer arms. So that's only common sense. If you're fighting against a taller fighter with longer arms, you don't want to be at the end of his punches. You want to be as close as possible to him. You want to be getting off before he does, before he keeps setting you up with these long ass jabs and right hands. And the reason why we know Roy Jones was right when he said it, because Lomachenko's trainer, he kept urging, matter of fact, he was really urging Lomachenko to be much more aggressive than he was right before Lomachenko knocked out Roman Martinez. I mean, because matter of fact, leading into that last round, Lomachenko's trainer, he was aggressively telling him, he was like, look, man, you're not being aggressive enough. I want you to go in there and put a lot of pressure on him. And soon as Lomachenko did that, the fight was over. The fight was over. Once again, guys, when I talk about these double standards, when I expose these double standards, I don't just tell you I think this is what's happening. None of this shit I'm telling you is circumstantial evidence. The direct evidence is right there for all of us to watch. You don't have to take my word for it. Matter of fact, go watch the Ward versus Barrera fight, because HBO, they called that fight. Go watch that fight and listen to how HBO and Max Kellerman, how they call that fight. Because there's something that Andre Ward and Lomachenko have in common when it comes to those fights. Both fighters moved up in weight. Both fighters moved up in weight. The difference is Andre Ward's opponent was 3 times better than Lomachenko's opponent. Okay? Andre Ward was fighting an undefeated Cuban fighter that was the #1 contender with a Cuban pedigree, trained by Abel Sanchez. One more time, undefeated, the #1 contender. And Lomachenko, he was facing Roman Martinez, a guy who had already been knocked out before, a guy that had multiple losses on his record. Okay? Now, that's not Lomachenko's fault, and this has nothing to do with Lomachenko. We are only focusing on Jim Lampley and Max Kellerman and their bias agenda and the double standards that they put out there clear as day for all of us to see. Once again, go watch the 2 fights and listen to how they call the fights. Go watch all of the Rigo fights. I'm talking about the fights where Rigo got knockouts, where Rigo kept knocking his opponent down with 1 punch. Go watch and listen to the commentary when Jim Lampley called the Guillermo Rigo versus Roberto Marroquin fight. That was a beautiful display of boxing by Guillermo Rigondeaux. Matter of fact, you know what Max Kellerman and Jim Lampley said about Lomachenko tonight when he was fighting against Martinez and he was displaying this great, excellent defense? You know what Jim Lampley said? Jim Lampley and Max Kellerman, they said that Lomachenko's defense was so good that he could swim in the water without getting wet. You think Jim Lampley or Max Kellerman ever said that when Guillermo Rigondeaux was outboxing the shit out of a much bigger and a much tougher at the time Roberto Marroquin? You think they were saying that about Rigo? It was the contrary. Matter of fact, they were adding insult to injury when Rigo was fighting against American, because when Rigo was beating the shit out of American, they were actually giving American props for taking some of the shots. And they were basically saying, well, he could be a star after this performance. For you to do this against Rigo, he could be a star. The way he's getting hit and the way he's taking those shots, and and this is the style that the fans want to see. You see how the double standards work? When it comes to VASYL Lomachenko, they're praising him for not getting hit. He could damn near dance underwater without getting wet, right? But when it comes to Rigo not getting hit, they're actually praising the guy who's getting hit instead of the fighter who's inflicting all of the damage. We know what time it is. Something else I want to clear up is, once again, when it comes to Jim Lampley and Max Kellerman, they're quick to accuse a fighter on the coincidental list of ducking and avoiding someone like Lomachenko, who has his Hope insurance, right? So that's what they did. They tried to blame Nicholas Walters on why the Walters versus Lomachenko fight didn't happen. The truth is, Bob Arum and Team Lomachenko, they offered Nicholas Walters the same amount of money that they offered Guillermo Rigondeaux, which was $500,000. And Lomachenko was supposed to get anywhere from $800,000 to $1 million. So Lomachenko came up with a proposition, and that proposition was to offer Nicholas Walters an extra $300,000, which really is a side bet. If Nicholas Walters wins the fight, then he'll get an extra $300,000 from Lomachenko's purse, right? Since Lomachenko was the one that came up with this bet, how come Lomachenko didn't just say to Bob Arum, you know what, Bob, forget it. I'll take the $500,000 and I'll make a bet with Nicholas Walters that if I win the fight, then I take $300 out of his purse. How come he didn't take the role or the position that Nicholas Walters was in? Isn't it the same thing? And you know, the answer to that is obvious, because neither Lomachenko or Nicholas Walters wanted to be the fighter to get the smaller cut of the pie. So you can't sit over here and say the fight didn't happen because Nicholas Walters was avoiding or ducking Lomachenko. No, neither one of the fighters wanted to take $500,000, and both of these fighters are on the same level. Neither one of these fighters, Nicholas Walters or Lomachenko, are big stars. They both have one big significant win on their record. In fact, it can easily be said that Nicholas Walters, he's faced much better competition than Lomachenko. Okay? While both Lomachenko and Nicholas Walters, they have a big win on their record. Lomachenko beat Gary Russell, who was undefeated at the time, and Nicholas Walters, he knocked out Nonito Donaire. But once again, when it comes to Nicholas Walters, he's beat undefeated power punchers. Matter of fact, one of the guys he beat actually beat him twice as an amateur. Matter of fact, for the Olympic trials, okay? And this was the guy that Nicholas Walters had to actually beat, an undefeated power puncher, all right? When it comes to Lomachenko, his only significant win on a high level is over Gary Russell. So there is no leverage that Lomachenko deserves over Nicholas Walters, unless they're just basing it on complexion. That would be the only reason why Bob Arum would automatically assume this guy deserves more money than that guy. Matter of fact, I even asked Bob Arum that question. Why do you believe Lomachenko deserves more money than Nicholas Walters? And he simply said to me, because he's the best. Because he's pound for pound the best. That was Bob Arum's response. Which clearly sounds to me like Bob Arum was basically trying to tell me, that he believed that Lomachenko would probably be easier to sell than Nicholas Walters. That's what the suggestion was. He didn't say anything like, oh, it's because Lomachenko, he did much better numbers when it comes to TV ratings than Nicholas Walters did. He didn't say anything like that. Just basically, he liked Lomachenko better. That's pretty much what Bob said. So this is clear proof that it wasn't Nicholas Walters that avoided Lomachenko, and it wasn't Lomachenko that avoided Nicholas Walters. But if you were forced to slightly blame either one of these fighters, you would have to slightly blame Lomachenko. Why? Because once again, Lomachenko, he could have just said, forget it. How about we get paid the exact same amount and the winner gets an extra $300,000? How about that, Bob? He could have said something like that. But it's clear now, we know that Team Lomachenko, they were not going to budge when it came to them getting the bigger piece of the pie. Now, what's funny when it comes to once again, the double standards and HBO, when I hear them accusing Nicholas Walters of ducking Lomachenko and he turned down the fight, he outpriced himself, etc., etc., etc. It's funny to me because if you notice, HBO's Jim Lampley and Max Kellerman, they only accuse a fighter of ducking or being reluctant to get in the ring if that fighter is on the coincidental list. If you guys notice, HBO, when they were calling Guillermo Rigondeaux fights and Rigo was calling out the undefeated at the time Abner Mares, the Nonito Donaire, who was pound for pound, top 5, one of the best fighters in the world, when he was calling out the Leo Santa Cruzes and he was fighting on HBO, if you guys recall, Jim Lampley never said, oh, by the way, Nonito Donaire turned down a fight, Abner Mares turned down a fight, Guillermo Rigo has been calling them out and they don't want to fight. Jim Lampley never said that. Jim Lampley, he had never brought up Golovkin turning down an Andre Ward fight. He had never brought up Canelo Alvarez turning down a Jamel or Jamal Charlo fight or a Demetrius Andrade fight. He never talked about that. Only when the fighter is on the coincidental list does he then say, oh yeah, that Nicholas Walters turned down the fight, etc., etc. Once again, we know what time it is. So I'm gonna go ahead and wrap this video up. That's pretty much all I got for now, and I'll be talking much more on this topic and many others. But that's all I got, guys. I'm on to the next one.